which is contact center predictions for 2014. I'll take you through the agenda. So I'm going to start off with a few introductions, a little bit of housekeeping, and two well-known speakers who've been on a number of our webinars over the last 18 months. Martin Hill-Wilson from Brainfood Consulting. Martin, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone.
And also Tim Pickard from NewVoiceMedia.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon. And we've got a real treat. We've got a whole range of predictions and looking at trends in the way the market is moving. And I've got to say that probably more has changed in customer service over the last 12 months to 24 months than probably in any one concerted period I've seen over my entire career.
I would say you've got more chance this year if you're predicting to have the thing come true than the last 20 years, because we've all been saying stuff and it's never happened, has it?
Yeah.
And actually, it's beginning to come true.
So, and we're also going to be taking your tips and your predictions,
Yep.
And we're going to be doing that as the webinar comes through. We're going to be doing that through the chat room, so please log into the chat room, and then we'll be doing some interactive questions and answers. What I will do is, if you'd like to log into the chat room, and in one or two words, please could you describe the activity levels in your contact center today? So that will be quite interesting. There's a little bit of bad weather, so I don't think there's going to be floods of travel-related problems. But it'll be quite interesting to see what's happening in people's call centers today. Busy, I would imagine.
I would imagine.
So let's have a look. Julian says sales marketing spikes but busy due to a new catalog launch on Monday, says Nikki. Jill, extremely busy. Danny, extremely quiet at the moment. So it'd be interesting to know what Jill and Danny call centers do, if you put some details in there. Christy is saying peaks and troughs in Basingstoke. The garden waste sign up has just started, so it might be a council there. Busy. Christmas review and planning for a product launch. Very busy with RFPs. Very quiet at the moment. Busy, full of new activities and preparations. So I think preparation is quite a good time now to reflect on predictions as what's going to happen.
Yes.
Quiet but interesting changes with the launch of web chat.
Yeah, it's very good then.
So be interested to hear what's happening on web chat. Complete overhaul, says Aaron. Eric says too high. Busy, spikes getting smoother, very busy. Busy due to weather-related issues. So we've got quite a lot of pieces on that overall. Are we going to go for a poll before we get going? So
we've got a vote, I think, first of all.
So what we're now going to do is we're going to go to a little vote. Before we look into the future, we'll just have a look back at what's happened to us recently. And I want to ask the question, which of the following has happened to you in 2013? Tick all that apply. Have you had high volumes of calls? Have you had damaging comments on social media? Have you had budgets cut or a headcount freeze? An IT system failure? And this is probably something more than the usual systems going slow. A major disaster, fire, flood, power cut, or the like. So if you'd just like to vote on those, that's in the little one box on the right-hand side. And we'll have a look at which one comes up. Any predictions from our speakers on which one they think is going to be top?
I would go for number one, actually.
Yeah, high volume of calls, definitely. Yep.
I think some will have suffered a few bad times over social.
Yeah.
And I bet you.
Well, I think budget cuts and headcount freezes is probably going to be it's going to be featuring in there because that last year was quite a tough year.
There you go.
There we
so
go.
Let's have a look at the results. Well, 78% have experienced high volumes of calls. 40% damaging comments on social media. Probably a bit lower than I would have expected that one, I've got to say. Budgets cut or headcount freeze. Well, I suppose we're still not quite out of the recession yet. And IT system failure, 48%. That's staggering. Staggering.
That is high. The cloud
number.
That's the cloud.
Yeah. And
it's got to be the cloud's the answer. It's got to be, isn't it?
But only 12% have had a major disaster. So I guess the the weather may a snowstorm coming might change that.
Well,
so quite interesting.
You said 2013. The storms have been in 2014.
Yeah, they have indeed. So which brings us on very nicely now to have a look through into the predictions for 2014. So I'm now going to pass the baton across to Martin Hill-Wilson, who's going to take us through the first of your predictions.
Excellent. Well, actually, what I'm going to do first of all is just give Tim a chance to line things up and talk a little bit about New Voice and a few things that you wanted to say in terms of predictions as well, Tim.
Well, I have my own predictions that I wanted to share as something of a backdrop. They're kind of macro and fairly high level. So I just wanted to kick a couple of things around that I think are going to have an impact on us this year, and certainly in terms of the responses to those questions, I think maybe some upbeat news. So let me tell you a little bit about NewVoiceMedia. I know many of you are familiar with us, but I'm going to very speedily talk to you about who we are. So we're a cloud-based contact center provider, and we would deliver all of the elements of a contact center that you would expect in terms of the technology, but we do that all from the cloud, all from our own technology, from a global infrastructure. So we have nodes now all around the world, and we have customers all around the world who are taking advantage of that. One of our USPs is around how we manage the caller experience and the agent experience. So we are recognizing inbound calls, and we're making intelligent routing decisions based on information that's held within the organization, whether that's within the CRM or other applications, or whether that's actually public domain information, and making routing decisions based on where is the best place for that call to be routed through to. So that really, our customers use that in some really interesting ways that help them to make that caller experience very different. And of course, what they're trying to do is to match the caller experience with the experience they receive from that company through other channels. So it's a very interesting way of working with customers, and that is a multi-channel environment as well. So engaging in all of the different channels that we're going to talk about today. That also, we have an outbound element to that as well. So in the sales and marketing environments, being able to gain a significant amount of insight into what's happening through sales and marketing activity, and specifically through outbound telephony environments, and really understanding what's going on there, and being able to refine those processes and make them much more efficient. So here's a few stats about the business. As I said, we're a global organization. We have and we work with over 300 contact centers in 30 countries now, 12,000 agents who use our single instance multi-channel environment or multi-tenant environment, and some of the customers that we work with. And you can see there that they're all very engaged and interested in managing customer experience. They're all significant brand names, and as I said, really concerned about that customer experience really adding value to the brand name. And the other thing that I would draw your attention to is that we have a public trust site, www.newvoicemedia.com/trust, which is a real-time view of our performance and availability. And because we build our own technology, we are very confident about our performance and availability stats. So that's a very quick view of who NewVoiceMedia is. Obviously, more information at the website. And a couple of my predictions, just to kind of put a backdrop on what we're going to talk about. I was reading the Deloitte CFO survey that came out last week, and very interesting about the economy and what's happening with the economy. And there's a lot more confidence now in the economy than there has been. This is a UK survey, so apologies for those of you who are international, but I imagine that a lot of what we're seeing here is being replicated in other countries as well. 57% of CFOs think that it's a good time to take on more risk, i.e. onto their balance sheet, and that is in terms of expansion, investment, hiring. So greater investments are forecast from CFOs. Business optimism is running at the highest level for 3 years, which is great to hear, and I think probably we can all feel that. But I think the effect of that in terms of increased investment and increased optimism is that we are likely to see greater investments in our technologies. We're likely to see greater investment in people. We're likely to see greater investments in new products, services, and new markets from organizations. And that, of course, is good news for all of us, because that sort of generates that whole economic cycle and economic process.
Could you just press the change color screen button there just to dismiss that message?
Sure. Sorry.
So I think that's very positive as a backdrop. The other thing I think, as a kind of a high-level view, and I would say this because obviously we're a cloud contact center provider, but I think the cloud specifically in our market is moving forward very quickly in terms of market share. Last year, cloud contact center grew by about 30% globally, whereas the on-premise providers were flat to slightly down. So, and my prediction would be that growth, in other words, the transition away from on-premise providers or building technology on site to a cloud adoption is going to accelerate.
And it'd be quite interesting to ask the audience about use of cloud.
That would be a very interesting question. How many people are considering using that's cloud? Right, or considering using it within the next 12 months? That would be. That would
Perhaps
be.
If you'd like to put that into the chat room, callcenterhelper.com/chat.
Well, I mean, certainly one of the things you're saying there, Tim, is that for the last 5 years, whilst we've had this recession, we've not been waiting for the digital transformation. That's been happening anyway. So it'll be interesting to see what effect greater budgets are going to have in terms of the speed, because anyway, irrespective of that, a lot of people have been saying that the speed of this transformation is accelerating anyways.
Yeah.
So if it's now
and it's a case of
fueled with more budget, it's going to be interesting to see what happens there as a result of that. So let's, picking up on what you've said, let's start getting into the conversation now. By the way, Jonty said earlier at the top of the screen that we're going to do this in a slightly different way. So if you're used to these kinds of formats, we quite often have a number of polls throughout the session. Today we've mixed it and made it slightly more fluid, because what we're going to do is to crowdsource this conversation today. So at the beginning of each section, so we're going to talk about multi-channel, we're going to talk about social, we're going to talk about mobile, I'm going to be inviting you.
Just press the change one, or keep the bottom.
I'm going to be asking you what your views are. Okay, so just to repeat myself, we are going to be inviting you either through the chat room or through the GoToWebinar, whichever way you want to communicate, what your views of the predictions are. But look at those at the end, and then Jonty is going to give some lucky so a bottle of champagne at the end of the stuff. So that's how we're going to play the game. As you can see, there's a wonderful picture of the champagne. Now, talking about the world, looking out there, Tim's just said that there's probably more money to fuel all of this transformation. Fundamentally, being in 2014, at the beginning of the year, it's no different from the end of last year. All of these things have been in play. And if you'll excuse the pun, the cloud's way up there with big data. The net effect that that's had is empowered both us as consumers as much as organizations. Things are changing dramatically in terms of our relationships between brands and customers. That same technology and infrastructure has fueled social interaction. It has enabled organizations, particularly through the online world, to develop personalization in real time, almost at will. And by the way, if you're a marketing background listening to this conversation and you've read a few predictions for 2014, you will have undoubtedly seen personalization as being a major top three trend in marketing. And our argument that we've placed back to you actually throughout last year is that personalization is going to trip over into customer service very strongly. And of course, multi-screen and omni-channel. That was a word that appeared at the top of 2013 and has grown and grown. You might not like the language of it, but what we're really talking about now is joined up. And I think the first point I want to make in terms of thinking realistically about our predictions is that we should not think about any of them in isolation. This chap here, Michael, is very, very experienced in terms of his observation. He belongs to one of the big analyst companies, and he makes a really good point here. He said, look, it's interesting to think about these separate things, but actually it's much more interesting when you consider them as a whole and you mash them all up together. If you want an example of that, just look at this statistic. Social and mobile, how does that work together? Well, the reality is many of those social networks are increasingly experienced through some form of mobility. And in fact, you're beginning now to see the rise of mobile-only applications such as WhatsApp, WeChat, Snapchat, and we've got a stat later on showing how some of the bigger social platforms, Facebook, particularly, as reported, is beginning to lose some of that messaging traffic to some of these dedicated applications. So if you're really trying to think about one area, you often have to think about that in concert with others. So if we translate that into our world, the key question is how much of your traffic is mobile, and increasingly how much of that is going to be social, and you've got to think about the customer experience through that particular lens. That all being said, before we get slightly ahead of ourselves, the other thing to remember, of course, is that the world is not entirely digital. You know, we're not there yet. We're not in 2050 where people will look back and go, do you remember the world called analog in the way that we remember Victorian? It's not quite there yet. And the fact is, if you look at Ofcom figures, I think we're still in the UK something like 30% refuseniks, or people who just can't or don't want to be on the net. I don't know what that number is in your local territory, but you're always going to have a percentage who are not involved as far as that's concerned. And so if you're providing customer service to that very diverse group, probably applies more if you're B2C, then you need to think.
Or a public service.
Or a public service, indeed, yeah. You need to think about that point in terms of how you still reach out to people. So with all of that said, we're going to hit our first big topic, which is multi-channel. And the point, I suppose, to make about multi-channel is that hopefully we're moving from a world where they're all isolated channels, and increasingly they're all on. And the thing I want to really point out before we get into this is that we are now in a world of voice and text and actually video, and that's deployed for live, assisted, and self-service. And part of the skill of this year will be to blend those things together in a kind of intelligent way. So as I said to you, as of now, start contributing your ideas. And if you've got a particularly strong view on that, please, we'd love to hear it in terms of either the chat window or go to webinar in terms of what your views are.
And we've got a few of these have come up already. So a few predictions for the future. Okay. Patsy has said a prediction: increased use of shared service contact centres, meaning cross-skilling and upskilling advisors, and the requirement from tech to provide more information and more solutions.
Yeah, I recognise that entirely.
So, particularly shared service, particularly on the ball now with things like local government.
Yes.
To pooling areas together.
And we'll see that also amongst sales and marketing services much as well.
Home working.
Yeah. Sure.
Says Sarah 14. Home working prediction. Working from home a lot more, especially during bad weather.
Yes.
Certainly quite a key one.
Yeah.
This is quite interesting. Johan says a decrease in telephone contact versus an increase in web chat.
Johan, give us your stat on that. What's your prediction in terms of the volumes? I'd like to hear from that.
That will be interesting.
Yeah, that is an interesting one because that has been something that's been predicted for a long time, and our information and how we've been tracking this shows that actually voice channels have not decreased over time as we've seen other channels increase. So there's a general overall increase in contact.
Total contact volume seems
absolutely
to be rising.
Yeah.
Marcia's prediction: customers will expect personalization with companies they already deal with, and will expect such things as free shipping for being VIP customers just because they're on a company's contact list rather than presumably being signed up to the Prime program.
The VIP
yes,
program.
The value of being a customer. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so if you've got any other tips, if you'd like to add those into the chat room, which is callcenterhelper.com/chat. If you want to download a transcript of the chat room, as a question that's come in, there's a little button down on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. It looks like a little U with an arrow on it. If you click that at the end of the webinar, you can download a transcript of the chat room.
Okay, well done everyone. That's a great start for 10. Right, let's roll on then. So we're going to have a look at this area specifically then about multi-channel predictions. So first thing, we've just talked about it actually, chat. There you go. One of the most interesting things about chat is the perceived speed. Now, it's always been very interesting as far as call centers are concerned. If you ask people how long they think they queue for the telephone versus how long they're actually queuing for, there's always a mismatch there. And in this world, of an instant on, it doesn't often fit our expectations to sit in the queue. Now, it depends where you are in the world in terms of how bad that queuing is. Some people it's really tragic. But chat has definitely risen on that expectation. Apparently, the average amount you wait now to get connected is just a minute.
Right.
So that kind of fits our expectation. And of course, chat has done an extremely important thing, providing a live form of support as we do online. And of course, that's grown hugely. And it's been terrifically significant to e-commerce in terms of providing that kind of support, because still e-commerce is losing a tremendous amount in terms of unrealized shopping opportunity.
At the point of checkout. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And video. We had a gentleman from Shoe on, do you remember, who talked about video at that point being incredibly important to get people over that line. Yeah.
Yeah. He features a little bit later on. So that's important. Now, interestingly, chat is also starting to feature for those of us who are getting into social. Because obviously social is a growth channel, customers want to do that, and it starts in a public domain context. However, there are many situations where legitimately you do need to transfer seamlessly from public into a private context. And chat is probably the most suitable partner to Twitter, or Facebook for that matter, mainly because it's text, it's real time, and also if you've integrated it successfully, you can also transfer context and also advisor seamlessly. And so there are some really good examples. Ask City has been the one I've quoted extensively in the last 12 months, but it's more and more available out of the box really in terms of multi-channel, where you will be moving between those two things. And again, the elegance of that solution is that you want to push people back into Twitter afterwards to get harvest the well done thing.
Yeah, that's right. That was a great experience. Thank you very much, kind of thing. Yeah. But you don't necessarily want that full conversation to be held in a public arena. Yeah, absolutely.
So the headline there is to say predicting it's going to be increasingly real time and the need to be able to demonstrate cross-channel competency in the future. Now, this might not be something that everybody has seen, and I think it's really, really exciting. This is the time where suddenly social customer service also includes self-service. And I forget the name of the firm. I apologize for not promoting that, but certainly the first client of the firm is O2. And I think this is going to be very popular and others are going to imitate. And it's a clever, simple idea essentially saying that you can use social as a secure interface for providing back-end information, stuff that you would have for the customer. And you use the service called #tweetserve. It enables the customer then to grab certain services like real-time account information, balance, credit, how much remaining data they've got, uploads, updates, latest handsets, etc., etc. Now that will obviously change depending what vertical market, but the way in which you enable it, which I think some of you will go, yeah, how does that work? It's simple. You tweet, in this context, the brand name, #tweetserve. Customer will then receive a direct message with a verification code. They've got to push that back in, and then the brand is comfortable that they are dealing with the person they want to. So the ID and V has been enabled, and then, of course, they're free to grab whatever information they want. So, again, this is a very, very important part of bringing together an ecosystem of different channels all collaborating, and social has now got the ability to deliver self-service. So I think that's an interesting thing for the year. I predict others are going to have a go at doing that. Now, the other big thing, of course, that I'm keen to point out is that it's not just Twitter and not just Facebook. And communities where customers help customers has been very, very successful in a whole number of verticals. Telco is well known for that, and a number of others. And the thing I would just like to say is that we should, if you have not yet done that, spend a little bit of time this year looking at the examples where it is well proven and well developed, and ask yourself the question, should we and could we incorporate that kind of format? Because having an ongoing relationship in a community format with your customers who both help you on service but also deliver good ideas and contribute and get closer, it's a marketeer's dream, it's a service person's dream, it's a genuine win-win on both sides. And if there is an opportunity to do that, you'd be foolish not to take it up.
Yeah. And there are some good examples of people who do this today. GiftGaff is a good example of that. They give service credits to people who answer questions on their behalf within their chat groups and those types of things. So that actually is very popular with their customers.
Yeah. So same thing we're doing today. You crowdsourcing the conversation. Again, use your customers to crowdsource that as well. That's all very much part of the spirit. The other thing, of course. And then here's a new example of community. Now, this was actually something Jonty and myself were looking at as we were doing our rehearsals, and we got quite excited about this because this is a form of community. This is we'd have seen things like Get Satisfaction and Lithium and organizations like that providing the platform, and of course you've always got to be interested to see what Google comes up with. And at the end of last year, they came up with Helpouts. Now, at this point in time, It's really just enabling an individual who's got a service. It could be
Yeah.
PCs, beauty, therapy, whatever you want as an individual, providing that service to anybody they want out on the web. And if you go and Google help outs to go and have a look at the service offering, you can see how that's working. Anyway, we got very excited, didn't we?
Yep.
And
tried it
Jonty
out.
was convinced that this would be working with customer service. So what happened?
Well, it's a very simple thing that you can go to Google Help Outs, and they've actually got some advisors you can speak to try it out. And it's just a very simple way if you wanted to provide a video capability into the contact center, which would be very useful in, say, a sales center where you can do what we call show and tell, where you can actually hold stuff up to the camera. You just set up an account, and as long as you're not charging for the the service like a consultancy online, you could be up and running very quickly.
And we actually got through to their helpline, didn't we?
Yeah.
There's a very tired-looking individual.
4:30 in the morning in the
4:30
United
in the morning.
States it was.
Yeah, Mountain View.
Oh, in the US.
Help outs across his T-shirt.
Oh, right. Oh,
Yeah.
very interesting.
And it just worked. It just worked. So, and by the
This
way,
is from the browser straight through.
Yeah, you've just got to download a little plugin.
So is this
online.
WebRTC technology in action?
I think
Sounds like it may be.
probably it is, because we saw on the top of the browser, it's actually Google Plus Hangouts.
Oh, okay.
Rebranded at local level for help outs,
Got it.
actually. But I suppose the key message there is we are going to get more and more used to seeing somebody on screen with a headset in various
Absolutely,
stations of shepherding.
absolutely. And I imagine
As a normal
we'll
form.
talk about that as it gets built into products.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely right. So the other element of this collaboration is, by the way, I think this is prime time for thinking about how do we better support and empower those of us who are doing advisory work within our own contact centres. And I'm a big fan of using, sort of collaborative platforms to link everybody together, particularly, by the way, if we're on different sites. And also, if from a customer experience agenda, we have this thing about trying to collaborate with middle and back office, then again, using that kind of technology to link everybody up together, I think that there's a really strong ROI on that in terms of speed of response, the quality of collaboration across an organization. So again, a big fan of that, and I would expect some people to be making waves on that this coming year. Moving on, thinking about other kinds of support, you will see this as a growth thing. Now, Internet of Things may be something you've stumbled across, and this is really just saying that anything in an average room, from the venting to the heating to the projector we're using in this room, will increasingly be online, but using sensors and therefore sending back state of. Some of us already got it for personal health. It's really just an extension into the inanimate world. And the examples up on the screen here, if you were to buy probably a top-end car this year, you would find, part and parcel of that is that car would be reporting on its health. And if it was not healthy, you would be informed both as the consumer of that car, the owner of the car, and also the help center would be advised as well. And that now is increasingly going to become the norm. So this fits into our bracket called proactive, doesn't it? Preemptive service.
Yeah.
And trying to get ahead of the curve.
So how long do you predict it would take to get into something like a fridge or a dishwasher?
Well, again,
it's broken down and the engineer's on his way.
Well, literally, if I reckon this year the top-end brands, you will find that as a default in the most expensive, and that will all start to drip down now.
Yeah.
Probably, if you and I wanted to do it this year, it's going to be cheaper as an app for our health, on the smartphone.
Yeah.
But the principle is exactly the same.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen more and more. So actually, what we're seeing, and this is more of a 5-year context, we're going to have to think about live assistance and then virtualized assistance. Some of it will be anonymous to us, but some of it will have literally an avatar, face to it, but essentially is using just real-time monitoring, increasingly to be smart. So embedded support, that's going to be growing. And then we hit video, as you said earlier on, Tim. Dead interesting. And I just want to break down some stats for people, because there are some phenomenal things happening here. I mean, the one that blew me away is in 2016, the gigabyte equivalent of all the movies ever made in the history of film will move across networks every 3 minutes.
Wow.
I mean, that's extraordinary. That is just extraordinary. It's going to take 6 million years to watch all the video that will be uploaded in 1 month in 2016. Video will be 55% of all internet traffic.
Yeah.
Video will triple, in demand. Now, if this is a marketing webinar, what we'd be really saying is, how literate are we in marketing these days in terms of that medium? You know, huge implications, and it impacts us here in service as well. And so, what are we doing around that particular thing? So here's some examples that you've probably stumbled across. You know, the interesting thing about May Day, which most of us know about, was actually on Christmas Day. They have said that their average SLA is 15 seconds, and guess what? They did it in 9 seconds on average. It's extraordinary, given the demand that's going to be happening there. And last year, on one of our webinars at the top of the year, I think it was March time actually, Stuart was in the audience and typed in real time and said, actually, your example you're giving of our video customer service, I'll give you some of the performance data around that. And the point is, if you think about that, you think about the help outs that Google's got there. Increasingly, we are going to get comfortable with having voice and video, live in front of us in terms of performance.
Well, I think you're right. And I think there are some other interesting technologies that we'll probably start to see more of as well. Things like augmented reality, where you know you have a complex product shipped and you hold your phone up to it, having downloaded the app, and then it explains it to you. Using video, and it's you know it becomes very much more accessible then as a technology or whatever it is that you bought. And I think that we will start to see more of.
Well, I think it's a real shame that a lot of service organisations aren't doing more how to service videos.
Totally. Well, here you go. Let's grab that point. This is, I think, our to-do list this year, and I don't think anybody should imagine they shouldn't be doing something on this. So Jonty's point, first of all, is why don't you embed a video production team in your call centre? That's not a crazy idea any longer. No. I personally know Vodafone. Anybody else know of one, by the way? Just tap in and let us know. But if you think about it, you're going to have somebody who likes doing video. The cost of video is not great. You set some parameters and policy up and you practice a bit, and show and tell through video is so much more powerful.
And you may even find you've got staff in-house who are happily to potter around with video and can actually make quite respectable self-service video. Often they're best with a service engineer in front of a camera who says, this is how you do it. Credibility.
And in fact, I saw an example of this in America with a customer service center where the response to an individual's question was just videoed. It's literally somebody stood up as an advisor and she just talked for 3 minutes to Mrs. So-and-so and said, that's my answer back. And it has obviously warranted that kind of personalization, which is interesting. So if you can't do that, you think that's too wild, just go back to the very first point, which is, by the way, look at your FAQ and the impact of it. If it's all text-based, if it's all link-based, it looks dreadful. Most sites now that house huge amounts of information front-end it with pictures. That's how we respond. So really we should refresh all of our service knowledge, which is automated for self-service, through imagery or video this year. Right, let's talk a little bit. You'll notice, by the way, actually, I didn't tell you something. I read 18 other predictions in order to be able to do this deck today. And so rather than make our own up, we've fed off of other people. So you'll start to see some of these examples. And Dan Miller is an interesting fellow, just before we get to the end of this section, who has focused on a topic for the last couple of years called conversational commerce. Right. And he's really very good on all things to do with automation. And he makes, I think, a very good point. Siri has obviously led us back into voice-based automation. If any of you have done Nuance and know of them and what they're doing with Nina, which is their automated virtual assistant. In fact, they launched it at CES this year, and they said they've now got to the stage where they have got 50 archetypes which you can choose from and customize to a brand level. It's that advanced now. What he's saying here, though, is Dan saying Google will drive us to find us, to make it much more used to talking via mobile into it, instructing the app, the browser to go do stuff. So in other words, what we're really saying is that the era of virtual voice-based advisors is definitely upon us. And if you combine that with a technology that's been around for a while now, but has been fairly slow, voice biometrics. That's another way in which you get secure access. And here's a bit of a more way out prediction this year, but one of the things that Snowden has done in terms of the impact he's had on the world is to cause people to think much, much more about encryption and the cost of encryption. And actually, if you think about it, voice biometrics is a version of encryption. So one of my wilder predictions is this year is indirectly, I think you might find many more customers demanding and brands demanding safe and secure interaction, and voice biometrics is all part of that.
Yeah.
So,
it's had a much bigger impact outside of the UK, actually, the Snowden factor. France, Germany, and are in uproar about all of that, and it's had a much lower impact in the UK.
Well, some are even talking about the balkanisation of the net as a result of that, that people are actually going to go back to a regional view, in order to deal with that problem. That's another seminar there. Okay, so that's the end of that. Jonty, did we manage
we've got absolutely loads and loads of predictions from the
Great.
audience. So let's take a few. A couple on social media. Kirsty says a huge leap in social media for 2014, which is a big challenge for a borough council, but we're onto a big change in culture is needed. Nick says at least one major brand is going to suffer a major loss of business and or a major shift in share price as a result of a poor service, or instant as a result of a wave of negative feeling by social media. I think that's absolutely likely to happen. Els is saying he predicts the increasing complexity of transactions for live agents, but simple transactions will go away almost completely from the so much more
move to a different channel. To move,
I see that. The interesting question there, Els, is do you see that within the year, or is that a couple of years worth of transformation?
And we had a question about live chat earlier. A prediction came in from Johan. You asked for his prediction. 40% increase he's predicting.
I don't know if you picked up Phil's prediction kind of on that point, which is essentially the call volumes won't change because of social. People are using it. More people will use it essentially that don't currently connect with organisations. Because they don't want to wait on the phone and so forth. So in effect, it's a channel that will bring new people in. The overall volumes of voice won't change. Is his prediction.
Interesting.
Let's have a look at a couple of others. A migration from point solutions to multi-channel contact to a more integrated suite of providing common routing, reporting, and desktop applications. Certainly, what we're seeing is proliferation of channel. We're talking about video. That's just another channel. So it does need some way of consolidation all this together.
Daniel's getting ahead of the slides there. That's true.
Mike is saying a prediction of a shift from manual analysis of why customers contact to analytics tools to spread across all contact, not just handful, with an increase in voice biometric solutions. I've heard that prediction now for I think the last 6 years. So it'll be interesting to see if that finally breaks through into big time. Virtual contact and service organizations. We'll take one more. We've had a look at complexity. And constantly connected customer will expect service 24/7. Certainly, isn't it? The golden hour for customer service complaints on Twitter is a golden hour is at 8 p.m. till 10 p.m.
Yeah, when you got back home, you got time to make a complaint.
Which is typically just after the contact centre is closed for the evening.
Exactly.
So,
well, I think that this is going to be something that all of us are going to have to look at very closely in the next 2 years, really, is at what point do you pull the trigger to increase the hours? How do you justify it? How do you delay it as long as you can? And when do you inevitably go? But the direction is in one way.
So we'll pick up some more predictions in a minute. And callcenterhelper.com/chat if you're not already logged in, and to leave your predictions. Bottle of champagne for the best prediction, which we'll pick immediately after the webinar.
Indeed. Right, here's our next mastermind topic area, customer experience. For those of you that fancy making a prediction, hands-on buzzers. Right, so let's talk about this. We're really examining the same issue through the lens of the customer experience. And so the first point I wanted to make is that actually a lot of us have still got to deliver the basics. This is a piece of research, again, that came out Q4 of last year, part of a global study by Zendesk of their customers. Now, what makes this particularly interesting is this is not another YouGov survey, which is nothing wrong with those things, but this is actually based upon their customers' actual SLAs. That's what's interesting. And this is just the UK component. So it says 92% of customers cite speed of response as important, yet only 35% believe response times are good or excellent. And the same thing goes for speed of resolution as important. So in other words, when you first get through to me, and then finally how long does it take until it's dealt with. Now what we're seeing there is only a third of the time we're delivering on that. Okay, That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad in today's world for the customer experience. So if you own that problem, you know, and you've got customer experience in your title, you know probably that you're going to be focusing with your call center colleagues on dealing with that problem this year. It's got to be done.
There seems to be in a lot of companies very sequential processes where, you know, something happens, customer reports a fault, an engineer comes to site, he scratches heads, confirms, yeah, you've got a problem, I need to order some parts.
Yes.
Then the parts got to come, you've got to schedule that person to come back.
It's too
and that
long.
may or may not solve it. And, you know, 3 weeks may elapse during the whole,
It's just too long.
process.
Too long. So we've got to get smart about all that stuff. And just to remind ourselves, you know, if you do this stuff, then, you know, you start to go to heaven in terms of benefit. So we all know this stuff, but it's not going to become real until we get more of us doing that stuff. So that really, I would suggest, is going to be a prediction in terms of what you need to keep focusing upon for this year. But there will be some people in the audience who belong to organizations who are pretty much on top of that. So where do we go after that point there? And I wanted to talk to you about the next area, which has, oh, I've lost myself a slide here. But anyway, this is from Bruce Temkin. And let me just see if where's that gone? Where's Bruce gone? He seems to have disappeared completely for some reason. There we go. Who knows why? But anyway, this is from Bruce Temkin, who is...
You didn't predict that happening,
I didn't predict that happening. No, that's interesting. He has wandered off completely, Bruce. So I'll just recreate it for you because it's behind that little screen. Bruce Temkin deals with all things customer experience and has managed to probably attract and become the hub for customer experience professionals. There's quite a lot of work done at the end of last year in the UK on this, and he has made his list up of trends for the year. And if you could just peer through that thing darkly, you will see contact centers morph into relationship hubs as being number 7. And this is where it directly impacts us. And he produced from that a really interesting list of things to do in order to effect that particular transformation. And I thought I would just share it with you. We probably don't have enough time to go through it in detail now, but if you do download the slides, have a good look at it, because I've shown this actually to a couple of people and they all said, gosh, that's a really good description about what we're doing as a journey. And I think it's just interesting that he's managed to articulate that, and I think in quite an elegant way, what a lot of us are trying to do, you know, moving from this transactional world, which is just, you know, one thing, we don't think about the overall impact, through to trying to build greater value. And I think this is one really great way of describing it. So that's the value-added mission for some of us who are able to concentrate on that.
Well, I think the next step around this is being able to take a lot of that learning, that business learning, and put it into the business planning process. So to be very connected into the kind of core strategy of the business. And I think that's probably the kind of the outcome of all of that you're describing there. So, you know, actually it's really critical stuff.
It is. Well, it comes back to another thing we've talked about, which is marketing and service and sales, and all, you know, all collaborating very closely together. The other thing I'd just like to give a shout out to is to say all of that stuff, by the way, you cannot do unless you've got a much better way of managing your data. And so analytics, in whatever form, whatever way, you really need to be doing something. In my own work this year with performance and quality, and just attending things like the professional planning forum and those kinds of things, analytics is clearly becoming more popular across the piece. And of course, what we're really saying here is that it's diverted in this context towards reducing customer effort. More than anything else, that's the thing we really have to concentrate on. In fact, Jonty, your example about this sequential approach to service is all about reducing customer effort, you know, getting smart there. The other thing I'd like to say, and I think, I forget who it was, but they anticipated this point in terms of one of their predictions, is we've got to move away from point, you know, increasingly towards omni and integration. And I don't see it as being coincidental in the least that at the beginning of the year we saw 2 very, very significant acquisitions go down. Kana has been acquired by Verint, and Microsoft has acquired Paratior. And in both instances, it reflects a common thing going on with vendors, which is that they're looking at us, the organizations, trying to figure out what we want to invest in. And the answer to that is that we need to deliver joined up service experience. And of course, what they're doing is they're trying to buy the remaining parts of the puzzle so that they have a complete ecosystem in terms of service capability. So again, you're seeing early evidence of the vendors preparing themselves to meet the demand which they're expecting from organizations. So I think that's probably all I've got to say in terms of customer experience. Has there been anything specifically, Jonty, that's come in from that?
Yeah, we've got a number more predictions that have come through. Roxana has said a multiplication of automatic actions in call centers.
Right.
Manual actions that trigger more and more automated logs and shift a focus from productivity to value-added service without increasing the cost per contact.
So is this all about next best action and alerts and things are we talking about here?
Well, it strikes me this is almost tied into your, the car that says there's a problem.
Yeah.
That some of this information is being passed.
Yeah.
And then you can do perhaps more proactive.
This is certainly about using data to drive insight, to drive action, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So if your time belt's about to go on the car, and the garage can tell you, it's going to be an awful lot cheaper for you as a customer, and you'd probably be happier if they say it's just about to go, rather than it's gone.
And I guess the other thing about
complete service outage.
This is all about real time. So rather than waiting for the weekly meeting or the daily meeting and looking at the stats written in a piece of paper, this is all about real time use of it, isn't it? That's the other side of it.
We're also seeing lots of different predictions on call volumes. Will they go up, down, or not?
Right.
It'd be quite interesting to do a poll on that. In fact, let's ask the question of the audience: do you believe that call volumes are going to increase or decrease by the end of 2014? So if you'd like to put that into the chat room. Nikki has said on the back of the increase in contact medium, companies will invest in customer insights teams to analyze and recommend improvements based on what customers say. That's certainly a great way to initiate some change and have a customer insight team.
Well, and taking some learnings from what you're hearing at the front end of the business and put that into the planning process.
I think it's a great one. Increased cost for infrastructure in 2014 to accommodate for increased network traffic as a result of video and picture message implementation. So
could well be.
That could be more costly. And Evan has said, within my company, providing IT support for our clients, we're focusing on self-heal, self-service, and automation, essentially empowering the end user. So
okay, we've got a cool one here. You can now video conference with the Brisbane City Council contact call centre.
Oh wow,
that's amazing.
Well, perhaps after this webinar, we'll go and see if we can do
that. That's right. That's cool.
I do think in Brisbane, I think it is something coming up for 11 o'clock at night. So you probably have to wait till tomorrow morning to do that. So back to you, Martin.
Thank you very much. Okay, mobile and multi-device. This is an extraordinary area of growth. So again, if you've got some thoughts on that, please jot them down. These are the latest stats in the UK. I think you will find comparable stats in your own location, but this is really an indication. I remember talking about this beginning of last year, and the numbers then were 50% have got a smartphone, so we're just under 70. I have no idea what tablets were, but the key point about this actually is that the percentage of house owners in the UK was reputedly hovering at just under 25% before Christmas.
And who would have predicted that 5 years ago? Because tablet hadn't been invented then.
I know. But look at that, £29 in the UK for the cheapest tablet, Indian sourced. Tesco's have been, going crazy on them. So
what's
really,
$45 US.
Yeah, that's all. So tablets are not expensive. They are now the new laptop. In essence, everybody's got the damn things. And interestingly, again, for if you're not part of the UK, John Lewis is really one of our most successful retailers, and it's interesting that with all of their momentum, and they're getting a lot of things right, the point that we read down there, which is to say, we now see mobile to be the major way in which people shop online. Now, I just have an old adage that says, if you sell something in a particular medium, you're going to be servicing it in a particular medium. So in other words, we're bound to see increasing amount of service expectation happening over mobile as well.
And what we're seeing from our audience in increase or decrease in call volumes, most people are saying a decrease in call volumes. We've had about 6 or 7 there. Sarah says if we get the service right in other channels, calls will decrease. If we won't, certainly they will increase. And we're also seeing some big increases of predictions in growth of email and web chat.
Yes. I would buy the argument that if you do things in a static universe, which didn't change, we ought to be able to decrease volumes as we move it off to self-serve and cause the original reason to disappear altogether. The other interesting thing is, in a social world, the opportunity to engage with brands is growing. So it might well be we actually see more volume coming in as there's a greater propensity to communicate.
Yeah. And Nick has made an interesting thing here. We expect to see sales call volume decrease, but customer service likely to increase.
Oh, I like that.
So actually a sort of difference in impact of...
so we get more self-sufficient as consumers, deal to buy by ourselves, but then we need more help using it, extracting value at the other end.
Correct.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's good. So the other point to be made is call centers and websites used to be really quite different and separate. The key thing that mobile enables us to do is to provide a digital channel. So again, the evidence that we're looking at, and these are UK stats, but you'll see the same in any territory pretty much, is that smartphone users obviously go on social networks and they use web browsers. So just thinking about the simple point here, which is how do we actually provide other services, you've now got that digital channel coming up here. And of course, if you think about the mobile, it's an incredibly intelligent device. And if you really look at it, you can do all sorts of smart stuff. And this is just one example, the ability of the end user to be able to put a picture through if they have an accident, or indeed to use the GPS to guess where they are in terms of breakdown services. All of that ought to be able to anticipate and target service more effectively.
And what are your thoughts about customer service apps? Because we've seen a few of these. I'm not sure they're fully functional and developed yet, but do you see those increasing in 2014?
I think that an app requires a certain consistency of interaction from their customers to justify it. Otherwise, it's going to be another app sitting in my, the proportion of apps that we download versus the ones we use. That's the issue. If we use it a lot, if you're an Amazon type level of stuff, and actually you deliver tons of value, then I think a dedicated app works. But if you go back up to UX conversation and about what works best, which is a responsive mobile website versus an app, funnily enough, we're still 50-50, and there is no clear winner. And it may well be that the general convenience of going to a website that performs well in a mobile environment also wins the day. So I think both approaches are proving to be viable, and it's an open season on that particular point. But things like, as we talked about before, visual IVR, all those kind of clever things, which definitely are more encoded into an app, remain, I think, tantalizingly interesting if you can deliver on that stuff. So, who knows?
I think even simple things like the ability to add photos onto web forms could be quite interesting if you're reporting a pothole to the council.
Yeah,
right. Take a photo of it.
Totally.
Quite often,
Totally.
Photos have embedded in the photo the actual GPS coordinates of where the photo was taken. So could be another way of.
I've got the 8 minutes and counting sign from Jonty here. Indeed. So I'm going to advance straight on to the last big topic we've got on social. And there's really only a couple of points I want to make about this. I think the big deal, and again, if you've got some stuff on social, in addition to what we've heard, please give it to us. The big point this year is responsiveness. In other words, are you answering? If you are, how fast, and all the rest of it. And the story I'm using to tell this story is that those of you in the States, this is no big news. We extend our sympathies to you because you've had a rotten winter. It's been unbelievably cold.
Very, very cold.
And as a result of that, it has actually been pretty damn awful in terms of travel. And travel has been one of the places which has really been used most by customers for real-time responsiveness in terms of social channels, quite obviously. My flight, where's it, all the rest of it. So what you're beginning to see now is what happens in all new markets, the best get better and the worst just start to look really pretty appalling. And so what you've got to think about this year is, are you going to be left behind or keep up to speed? Because eventually what you're going to find is all customers expect the same from all brands. Right now it might just be your airline that's good, but it's not going to be too long before we expect it from everywhere. And this example is in terms of the winter, how well have American brands done? And the answer is pretty well. Almost 100% of tweets have been answered. In this case, with American Airlines, 12 minutes, JetBlue, 15 minutes, Delta, 13 minutes.
Amazing.
Very
amazing.
Very good.
I had a tweet my broadband provider yesterday at 6 p.m. and I got a reply 18 hours later.
Well, there you go. And actually, global averages are still a matter of days. Right. So, and by the way, still only 50% are being recognized. Now, some of this is to do with actually very low tech that we're using. We're using cobbled together free stuff, which isn't good enough. Some of it's to do with not social listening in the platforms. Some of it is the fact that we're a bit tight in terms of headcount. but that's got to be resolved this year. So responsiveness overall is the key.
Well, also I think there may be an element in terms of what are the business drivers behind these businesses. This is, the airline industry it's a very immediate industry now. So if there are delays, people need to know about them instantly. It's no good talking 18 hours later. There's a business driver that's supporting that investment as well.
So that's one thing. The next thing is, customer service over social is dynamic in the terms of the channels, and we have to keep watching out on a regular basis where people are going to be at. Here's just one simple for instance, which is the fact that there has been a well-reported migration, whether true or not, by the way, that's another point, of losing teens in Facebook for places like Snapchat. Now, what that means is, therefore, if you've got your ecosystem of customers where they choose to be online, you need to keep re-auditing that on a regular basis because it is going to change each year. And the prediction from Numero at the bottom, which I thought was a good one, is that customer service you're now increasingly going to be doing across multiple niche platforms. And the other point I would say is that actually, social is so damn dynamic that you really can win and lose in the same way you can with stock price over day. So your goodwill index, you need to think about going up and down across the day, which really just lends itself to this conversation around a much tighter real-time coordination amongst middle and back office. And so that really just nudges us in towards the end of the predictions that we've got, and we're going to have an open floor now just to say, is there anything else that has not been mentioned that you really do think needs to go into the pot? And you've got your last opportunity now to put them across.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Martin, and thank you, Tim, for that. It's been absolutely wonderful. We've got some more predictions from the audience. We had well over 50 predictions from the audience.
Wow.
So apologies if we haven't got to your prediction. We'll rattle through a few more now. The contact center will move away from being a top sales medium and will lend itself to more project-based work, e.g. accommodating trial teams for other elements of the business.
I'll buy that.
Yeah,
so I think it's a great one. The call center.
Great cloud application as well. Then.
Yeah. Customer service test house, if you like. That could be a lot of fun. Big customer support networks to promote mobile data costs will be reduced or improved in the wake of direct chat video support.
That's interesting.
An interesting one there indeed. Universalization of agents, says Ronan. Increased capacity to help customers, but pushing more self-service options.
Explain what universalization is, will you, Ronan? That sounds good, but I'm not sure I understand that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's able to...
do you mean, is that multi-skilling?
Maybe multi-skilling, but it may also be going further into the business process to resolve it, rather than just being...
Love to hear more about that, anyway. Okay, cool.
Increase in app development tailored to centers, enabling direct connection with the customer without going through a website.
Sure.
Certainly,
for some, that will definitely work.
Yeah, as you've mentioned, the same problem, though, of is it an app you actually use?
Yeah.
And I think customers will decrease budgets for customer service through outsourcing and focus on self-service channels in most elements. So I'm not sure if that...
Well, I think nothing has changed in the sense that we've always had two goals. One is to reduce service costs and improve customer experience. So I don't think that's going to happen at the expense of customer experience, but the quest will continue.
Okay, well that's about all we've got time for today.